7 years I had been Eleanor Vance. 7 years I had worn his ring. A testament to a love story that began in the sun-drenched halls of our high school. Preston, his name used to taste like warmth, like promise. Like every dream I'd ever dared to whisper into the night. We built our life meticulously, brick by brick. A cozy haven filled with shared laughter, quiet evenings, and the unspoken certainty that we were each other's forever. He was my rock, my confidant, the steady anchor in my often turbulent world. Our bliss felt unbreakable. A perfectly sculpted miniature world where nothing could truly touch us. Then came the promotion at Sterling Group. A celebration, of course. We popped champagne, toasted to his ambition, to our future, but with the new corner office and the hefty paychecks, subtle shifts began. Shifts I initially dismissed as stress, as the demands of a high-pressure role. He started coming home later. His once eager smile replaced by a weary frown. Our conversations, once meandering and intimate, became clipped, focused on his achievements, his grievances, his demands, my opinions, my day. My very presence began to feel like an inconvenience. A coldness settled in his eyes whenever I questioned him. A dismissive glance that chipped away at my self-worth, making me feel irrational, overly sensitive. He'd accuse me of making a fuss over nothing, of being too emotional, his words a subtle hammer chipping away at my perception of reality. And then there was Beatrice. Preston's younger sister had always been present, a peripheral figure, but after his promotion, she became an ever-present shadow. She was at our house constantly. Her presence almost a silent judgment in my own home. Their bond, once sibling affection, grew to an unsettling closeness. Whispers, secret smiles, inside jokes that excluded me entirely. Preston would defend her presence fiercely, snapping at me for being jealous or unreasonable. He'd brush off my discomfort with a wave of his hand, saying, "She's family, Eleanor, what's the big deal?" But at times was times a big deal, the way their shoulders brushed, the intimate way she'd tuck his tie or smooth his hair, the lingering glances. It felt wrong. An insidious poison seeping into the foundations of my marriage. A creeping suspicion gnawed at me, a dark slithering thing that I desperately tried to bury under layers of denial. This couldn't be happening. Not Preston. Not times my times Preston. I reasoned, I rationalized. I searched for explanations. Anything to avoid confronting the horrifying truth that was slowly unfurling before me. I clung to the memories of our past. The boy who used to write me love letters. The man who promised me the world. I told myself it was just a phase. A side effect of his new success. Something we could overcome if I just tried harder. Loved deeper. His birthday was approaching, a milestone, a chance. I convinced myself this was it. The perfect opportunity to cut through the ice that had formed between us. A grand gesture, a rekindling of the flame. He had mentioned he'd be staying at Beatrice's new apartment in upstate New York while on a business trip. A detail that now, in retrospect, chilled me to the bone. My plan was simple, reckless, born out of a desperate blind hope. I would surprise him, bake his favorite chocolate cake, drive the 9 hours through the impending blizzard, and remind him of the love that once bound us. It was a last-ditch effort, a desperate prayer hurled into the vast, indifferent universe, believing, truly believing, that this act of love would bring my Preston back to me. The roar of the engine felt like a frail shield against the escalating fury outside. Snow, fine as dust initially, began to thicken, blurring the lines between earth and sky. The 9-hour drive stretched before me, a daunting pilgrimage into the heart of a winter storm. But my resolve burned brighter than any dashboard light. Every mile chipped away at the hope I carried, replacing it with a bone-deep weariness. Yet I pressed on, fueled by a stubborn belief in the man I once knew. My hands, clamped tightly on the steering wheel, were slick with sweat despite the Arctic chill seeping through the vents. The road, once a familiar path, transformed into a treacherous, icy ribbon, each curve a new test of nerve. My mind, however, refused to stay anchored to the present danger. It drifted back, unbidden, to sun-drenched days and whispered promises. I remembered our senior prom, Preston in his ill-fitting tuxedo, stumbling over his words as he told me I was the most beautiful girl he'd ever seen. We'd danced under a canopy of twinkling lights, his hand warm and reassuring at the small of my back, a silent vow passing between us that night. And then there was the summer after college, when he'd surprised me with that tiny scraggly rose bush for our apartment balcony, simply because I'd mentioned I missed gardening. Something beautiful for my beautiful girl, he'd said, his eyes sparkling with an affection that now felt like a ghost. I clung to these fragments, polished them in my mind until they shone, using them as a shield against the creeping darkness of recent months. He was just stressed, I rationalized. This promotion, this new world he was navigating, it was changing him, yes, but not irrevocably. My love, my unwavering belief, could still reach him. This cake, nestled carefully in the passenger seat, was more than just a dessert. It was a peace offering, a physical manifestation of my enduring hope. I'd spent hours on it, meticulously piping the dark chocolate ganache, knowing it was his favorite. Each swirl was a plea, a silent prayer for reconciliation. The blizzard raged harder, a whiteout engulfing the highway. My wipers struggled, barely clearing a small arc of visibility. The world outside was a swirling vortex of white, mirroring the chaos within my own head. This storm wasn't just a physical barrier. It felt like a visceral representation of my life, a terrifying maelstrom I was blindly navigating, convinced there was calm at its center. I gripped the wheel tighter, my knuckles white, telling myself that reaching him, seeing his face light up, would make all of this worthwhile. It would be the proof I desperately needed that the good times, the times, real times, Preston, still existed beneath the hardened exterior. The memories of his dismissive remarks, the unsettling closeness with Beatrice, the coldness in his eyes, I pushed them all away, deep into the recesses of my mind, labeling them as temporary aberrations. As the hours crawled by, the landscape outside began to subtly shift, the dense forest giving way to the faint glow of distant streetlights. My heart hammered against my ribs, a nervous, excited rhythm. I was nearing Beatrice's apartment, the destination that held either salvation or utter destruction. My imagination conjured a scene. Preston, surprised and touched, pulling me into a warm embrace, apologizing for his distance, promising to be the man I fell in love with again. The thought brought a fragile smile to my lips. I imagined him cutting into the cake, sharing a slice, maybe even wiping a smudge of chocolate from my cheek with his thumb, just like he used to. The blizzard, though still relentless, faded into the background, replaced by a surge of anticipation. I was almost there, completely unaware that the only light waiting for me was the searing glare of a truth that would incinerate my entire world. The streetlights, now clearly visible through the swirling snow, cast a hazy glow on the unfamiliar apartment complex. My breath hitched as I pulled into a visitor's spot. The engine's purr, a sudden, jarring silence after hours of constant roar. The cake sat patiently beside me, its promise of sweetness a cruel irony. I fumbled with my phone, double-checking the apartment number Preston had given me months ago for Beatrice's new place. Unit 3B. A small, nervous smile touched my lips. This was it, the moment I would surprise him, melt away the distance, reclaim our love. My heart thrummed with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. Hauling the cake box carefully, I navigated the icy pathway, the snow muffling my footsteps. The front door to the building was ajar, a small detail I barely registered in my haste, dismissing it as someone having just left. I climbed the 2 flights of stairs, my boots crunching softly on the carpet, the scent of stale air and something faintly metallic filling my nose. As I reached Unit 3B, I noticed the door wasn't fully closed. It was open just a crack, a sliver of warm light spilling into the dimly lit hallway. My anticipation swelled. He must have left it unlocked, or perhaps Beatrice was expecting someone. I took a deep breath, rehearsed my excited surprise in my head, and gently pushed the door open, ready for the embrace I had dreamt of for hours. But the scene that greeted me was not one of warm reunion. It was a tableau from my deepest, most unspeakable fears, brought to life with sickening clarity. The soft glow of a bedside lamp illuminated Preston, naked, his hands tangled in Beatrice's blonde hair. Her back was to me, but there was no mistaking the gasp that escaped her lips as her head arched. Her body pressed impossibly close to his. My Preston, my husband, with his sister. The cake box slipped from my fingers, hitting the floor with a muffled thud. Time fractured, the world tilted on its axis, dissolving into a kaleidoscopic nightmare. A wave of nausea washed over me, so intense I thought my knees would buckle. It wasn't just betrayal. It was a perversion, a grotesque distortion of everything I believed in, everything we had built. My throat tightened. A scream trapped somewhere deep within my chest, unable to find release. As if roused by the sound, Beatrice turned her head, her eyes wide, but her expression quickly morphed from shock to a chilling smirk. Preston, however, remained oblivious, his grunts filling the suffocating silence. It was then that their voices, low and intimate, cut through the haze of my shock. "See? I told you she was obsessed with him," Beatrice purred, her voice dripping with venom, an undercurrent of something darker lurking beneath the surface. "Always so pathetic, trying to win him back." Preston chuckled, a sound that ripped through me, utterly devoid of the warmth I had once loved. "Let her try. Won't matter soon. Did you get the documents from Margaret's office? The insurance payout is still valid, right? We need to make sure everything's in order before, you know." My blood ran cold, freezing in my veins. Margaret's office? Insurance? Of course, Beatrice replied, her voice now dangerously eager. "The life insurance policy is solid, and once she's out of the picture, all her family money flows straight to you, darling. No messy divorce, no division of assets. Pure, clean inheritance. Just us, Preston, finally. We'll be set for life." I always knew she was too stupid to see past her own delusions. My breath caught in my throat. It wasn't just an affair. It was an execution plan. They wanted me dead, for money. The words bounced around my skull, echoing, amplifying, each syllable a shard of glass tearing through my psyche. The beautiful lie of my life, the love I had cherished, the future I had envisioned, all crumbled to dust in an instant. I was not just betrayed. I was marked for death by the two people I had trusted most. My body moved without my mind's command. I turned, my movements stiff, robotic, my eyes fixed on nothing. The pristine white cake, a monument to my shattered hopes, lay untouched on the floor. Its sugary sweetness now a bitter mockery. I backed out of the apartment, closing the door as softly as I could. The click of final, decisive farewell to the life I had just lost. The blizzard outside now felt like a comforting embrace compared to the icy horror that had just settled into my bones. I walked, stumbled, then ran down the stairs, out into the swirling white oblivion, leaving everything behind but the chilling echo of their words and the absolute, devastating knowledge that I had just heard my own death sentence. The biting cold of the car's interior was a small mercy, a distraction from the inferno of my mind. My hands, still shaking, fumbled with the keys. Somehow finding the ignition, the engine roared to life. A familiar sound now, alien, distant. The blizzard outside was a merciful shroud, mirroring the white-hot void where my world used to be. I drove. I don't remember how I got the car onto the main road, how I navigated the swirling snow and treacherous ice. It was a blur of instinct, a primal need to flee, to put as much distance as possible between myself and that apartment, between myself and the chilling echo of their voices. My body felt disconnected, a heavy vessel carrying a shattered soul. My limbs were stiff, cold, yet a tremor ran through me. Deep in my bones, my breath came in shallow, ragged gasps, as if the very air was too heavy to inhale. My vision tunneled, the streetlights outside blurring into streaks of hazy yellow. There was a peculiar numbness, a disassociation from reality that was both terrifying and strangely protective. Asterisk. This isn't real, asterisk. A small, desperate voice whispered in my head. Asterisk. This is a dream. A nightmare. You'll wake up. Asterisk. But the icy grip around my heart, the metallic taste of terror on my tongue, screamed that it was horrifyingly real. I could still hear Beatrice's purr, Preston's callous chuckle, the cold, clinical dissection of my life, my worth, my impending death. Asterisk insurance. Inheritance. Pure, clean inheritance. Asterisk. The words hammered against my skull, each beat a fresh wound. There was only one destination, one name that echoed through the fog of my shock. Cassie. My rock, my unwavering constant since we were clumsy teenagers navigating first crushes and algebra. Cassie, who had seen me through every heartbreak, every triumph, every awkward phase. She was the one who celebrated my engagement to Preston with genuine tears of joy, the one who promised to stand by me, no matter what. I remembered a silly pact we'd made in high school, after a particularly dramatic fight with a mutual friend. If anyone ever tries to hurt us, physically or emotionally, we run to each other. No questions asked. We just fix it. I'd laugh then, thinking it was just teenage melodrama. Now, it was my lifeline. She wouldn't judge, she wouldn't doubt, she would just times be there. Asterisk. The journey to her house was a kaleidoscope of white and gray, punctuated by the blinding glare of headlights. When I finally pulled into her driveway, the storm had begun to recede, leaving behind a pristine, untouched blanket of snow. I stumbled out of the car, leaving the door ajar, the keys still in the ignition. My legs felt like lead, each step a monumental effort. I hammered on her door, a desperate, frantic rhythm. Moments later, the porch light flooded on, and Cassie stood there, her face etched with immediate concern. She didn't need words. One look at my ghost-white face, my tear-streaked cheeks, my trembling form, and her eyes widened in horror. Eleanor? My God, what happened? Before she could finish, I collapsed into her arms, my body finally betraying the carefully constructed numbness. A guttural sob tore from my throat, raw and painful, followed by another, and another, until my entire frame was racked with uncontrolled heaving. Cassie's arms wrapped around me, strong and protective, pulling me inside, away from the biting cold, away from the world. She didn't ask questions, didn't demand explanations, she simply held me. Her warmth a stark contrast to the glacial horror I had just endured. Her steady hand stroked my hair as I crumpled to the floor, my face buried in her sweater, the scent of lavender and warmth a temporary anchor in the churning ocean of my despair. All the unspoken words, the unspeakable truths, poured out in incoherent gasps and sobs. Preston. Beatrice. They want to kill me. I choked out, the words tasting like ash and bile. Cassie's grip tightened, her silence a powerful validation, her presence a sanctuary. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't alone. And for the first time since pushing open that apartment door, I felt a fragile, trembling sense of safety begin to settle, like a thin layer of frost on scorched earth. Cassie didn't let me drown in my despair for long. The immediate aftermath of my confession was a blur of her unwavering comfort, hot tea, and gentle, insistent nudges towards action. By the morning, a steely resolve had replaced her initial shock. She led me to a small, unassuming office building in the heart of the city, a place that felt far removed from the swirling snow and the horrors of yesterday. Stepping inside felt like crossing a threshold. leaving the realm of emotional wreckage for the cold, stark world of legal strategy. Margaret O'Connell was nothing like the kindly, grandmotherly lawyer I might have envisioned in my naive youth. She was a force, a woman carved from granite and intellect. Her silver hair was pulled back in a severe bun. Her eyes, though kind, missed nothing behind sleek, wire-rimmed glasses. Her suit, impeccably tailored, seemed to hum with efficiency. Cassie had already made the call, her voice firm and resolute, even when recounting my fractured tale. "She's the best, Elle," she'd insisted. "Especially when things get complicated." She once represented a woman who exposed a governor's corruption during a divorce. "She doesn't just win, she times destroys asterisk." That thought, initially terrifying, now resonated with a dark appeal. Margaret listened, her face unreadable, as I recounted the unspeakable details. My voice trembled at first, threatening to crack under the weight of the memory, but her unwavering gaze and the occasional sharp nod steadied me. When I finished, the silence in the room was heavy, but not with judgment. It was the calm before a storm, a prelude to battle. "Eleanor," she began, her voice low but firm, cutting through my scattered thoughts like a surgeon's scalpel. "What they did, what they planned, is abhorrent and illegal. But right now, we focus on securing your safety and your future. Emotions are a luxury we cannot afford in this room. Can you do that?" I nodded, surprised by the strength I found in her directness. It was what I needed. No platitudes, no pity, just a clear path forward. Her instructions were precise, a step-by-step guide out of the quicksand. "First, we empty any joint bank accounts. Immediately. Every penny. Then, we freeze all joint credit cards. You are vulnerable right now, and they cannot be allowed access to your resources or to accrue debt in your name. We'll file for a temporary separation order first thing this afternoon. This creates a legal barrier, giving you a safe distance while we prepare for the full divorce proceedings and criminal charges." Each action she outlined, each practical step, felt like a small, deliberate act of defiance against the chaos that had engulfed my life. We walked to the bank, a whirlwind of forms and signatures, watching the numbers on the screen change, seeing my name alone on the transfer slips, felt like pulling myself from the wreckage of a car crash. The freezing of the credit cards, the filing of the separation papers, these weren't just legal maneuvers, they were anchors, slowly pulling me back to shore. With each completed task, a tentative glimmer of control returned. It was a faint spark, barely visible against the vast darkness, but it was there. I was no longer just a victim, a heartbroken wife. I was a strategist, a survivor beginning to plot my escape. My hands, which had trembled uncontrollably just hours before, now signed documents with a surprising steadiness. This wasn't just about a broken heart. It was about survival. About reclaiming a future that had almost been stolen. The fight had only just begun. But I finally had a shield, a formidable ally, and a newfound understanding that my life, my actual physical existence, hung in the balance. The game had changed, and I was ready to play. Margaret's words had been a cold splash of reality. "We need irrefutable proof, Eleanor. Something that speaks louder than their lies." My initial victory at the bank and the lawyer's office was a foundation, but it was far from a fortress. The next step, the one that made my stomach clench and my palms sweat, was to return to the house, our Times house, the one I had fled in terror. It was a daunting decision, a tightrope walk between the desperate need for justice and the crippling fear of revisiting the very source of my trauma. The mere thought of walking back into those familiar rooms, now tainted by unspeakable horrors, sent shivers down my spine. Every fiber of my being screamed "Times flee!" urging me to stay safely ensconced at Cassie's, far from the echoes of betrayal. Yet, a fierce, burning resolve had begun to smolder within me, fueled by Margaret's unwavering conviction and Cassie's quiet strength. They wanted me dead. This wasn't just about a broken heart anymore. It was about survival, about making sure they paid for their monstrous intentions. Fear clawed at my throat, but the cold, hard glint of determination in my own eyes, when I looked in the mirror at Cassie's apartment, pushed it back. I wasn't just Eleanor, the heartbroken wife. I was Eleanor, the survivor. And survivors fight. Cassie drove me, her presence a silent, solid anchor. We approached the house under the pretense of retrieving my essential belongings. A narrative Margaret had carefully crafted to keep Preston from getting suspicious too soon. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the silence of the car. Every shadow seemed to hold a threat. Every creak of the car's suspension sounded like a warning. As we pulled into the driveway, the house stood there, stoic and innocent under the pale winter sky, a cruel facade to the rot within its walls. "I'll wait in the car, Elle. Just honk if you need anything," Cassie whispered, her hand squeezing mine. I nodded, my throat too tight for words. Armed with a small, state-of-the-art digital recorder Margaret had provided, I unlocked the front door. The familiar scent of our home, a mix of old books, my lavender candles, and Preston's aftershave, hit me like a physical blow. It was the scent of a life that no longer existed, a ghost clinging to every surface. My movements were slow, deliberate, each step calculated to make as little noise as possible. The floorboards groaned beneath my weight, amplifying the sound in the oppressive silence. I imagined Preston and Beatrice lurking in the shadows, their eyes narrowed, their cruel smiles fixed on me. The thought propelled me forward. I had to be quick. I had to be silent. My target was the living room, specifically the decorative plant pot on the mantelpiece, where Preston often left his keys or wallet. It was a prime spot, visually open yet acoustically strategic. My hands trembled as I carefully lifted the heavy ceramic pot, my breath catching in my throat. What if they were home? What if they heard me? I paused, listening intently. Only the frantic thumping of my own heart filled my ears. With excruciating care, I tucked the tiny device deep into the soil, burying it beneath a layer of fake moss and small decorative stones. It had to be angled perfectly to pick up conversation in the living room, a place I knew they frequently used. I meticulously rearranged the moss, trying to make it look undisturbed. Every instinct screaming at me to hurry, to get out. The air felt thick, charged with menace, and my skin crawled as if under constant observation. The risk of being caught was immense. If they discovered me, or the device, all my efforts would be for naught, and my life would be in even greater peril. Every minute felt like an hour, every rustle of my clothes like a thunderclap. Once the device was hidden, I moved quickly, grabbing a few changes of clothes, some toiletries, and a handful of sentimental items, a worn photo album, a tiny porcelain bird Preston had given me on our first anniversary, a collection of letters from my grandmother. Each item felt heavy, weighted with memories, but I pushed the emotion aside. This wasn't a time for nostalgia. This was a mission. As I gathered my things, I heard the distinctive sound of a car pulling into the driveway. My blood ran cold. Asterisk, they were home. Asterisk, panic seized me, a blinding, all-consuming wave. I froze, clutching a faded t-shirt to my chest, my mind racing. No, I couldn't be seen. Not now. Not when the recorder was still active. I backed silently into the guest room closet, pulling the door almost shut, leaving just a sliver of space to see through. I held my breath, listening, my body rigid with terror. Footsteps. 2 sets. Heavy, then lighter, feminine. Preston and Beatrice. Their voices, low at first, then growing clearer, filled the house. "Did you see any sign of her?" Beatrice's voice, laced with a smug, almost gleeful edge. "No. Just the car. Probably trying to play the victim," Preston scoffed. They walked past the guest room, their voices fading slightly as they headed towards the living room. Asterisk. The living room, asterisk. My breath hitched. The recorder was there. I listened, straining to hear through the closet door, through the pounding in my ears, the muffled sounds of them settling down, then Beatrice's voice, sharp and clear. Did you manage to get that meeting with the insurance agent today? We need to finalize the payout details. No loose ends, darling. Preston's reply was a low grumble, then clearer. He assured me everything's in order, said it's just a matter of time. And the property deeds, all sorted for transfer? Beatrice's laugh, a sound that twisted my gut, floated through the air. Oh, absolutely. Soon, it'll all be ours. No more Eleanor and her pathetic clinginess. Just us. The life we've always deserved. Each word was a fresh stab. But this time, the pain was laced with a chilling clarity. This wasn't just my imagination. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was cold, calculated malice, spoken in the very heart of the home we had built. The shock of hearing their callous planning again, so soon after my first discovery, was profound. It stripped away any lingering doubt, any shred of the old Preston I might have clung to. My fear didn't vanish, but it was now dwarfed by an overwhelming, incandescent rage. They wouldn't get away with this. Not on my watch. I waited, a prisoner in my own home, until I heard them move upstairs. My muscles ached from the tension, but my resolve had hardened into steel. I crept out of the closet, retrieved the recorder with trembling fingers, and silently slipped out of the house. As I walked back to Cassie's car, a strange calm settled over me. The evidence was secured. Their guilt was undeniable. The fight was far from over, but I now held a powerful weapon, forged from their own treachery, and I was ready to use it. The hum of Cassie's car as we drove away that night felt like a low, comforting vibration against the tempest in my soul. I clutched the tiny digital recorder like a sacred relic, its cold metal a stark contrast to the burning rage that now coursed through me. The initial calm I'd felt, the strange sense of detachment, gave way to a churning mix of vindication and a bone-deep weariness. I had done it. I had the proof. But the images, the voices, played on a loop in my mind. A horrifying film I couldn't turn off. The next few days at Cassie's were a blur of restless sleep and whispered conversations with Margaret O'Connell. The lawyer's voice, ever steady and pragmatic, was the only thing that kept me from crumbling. This recording is critical, Eleanor. It changes everything. Her words were a balm, solidifying my belief that this nightmare had a path to justice. But Margaret also advised caution, a strategic pause before the public confrontation. Preston and Beatrice needed to stew, to feel the absence of my presence, the sudden lack of funds, before the final blow was dealt. The idea of returning to Time's house, the one I had once called home, the one where my life had shattered, was still terrifying. But it was no longer a place of unadulterated fear. It was now a battleground. And I was armed, not just with the recording, but with a fierce, unwavering purpose. My previous trip had been rushed, fraught with the terror of discovery. This time, I needed to go back to gather the remaining essentials, yes, but also to leave my own, subtle mark, a message, a prelude to the storm I was about to unleash. Cassie offered to come, but I shook my head. This was something I had to do alone. This was about reclaiming agency, about walking back into the lion's den on my own terms. The drive felt different this time. The blizzard had cleared, leaving behind crisp blue skies and glistening snow, but an internal storm still raged within me, a controlled fury. As I pulled into the driveway, the house still stood, a deceptively charming colonial. But to me, it was now a mausoleum of broken promises. The key, once a symbol of shared life, felt heavy and cold in my hand. Stepping inside, the air was stale, silent. It smelled vaguely of Preston's cologne and, faintly, of Beatrice's sickly sweet perfume, a combination that made my stomach churn. Every corner held a memory, a phantom limb of my old life, The living room, where we'd watched movies wrapped in a blanket. The kitchen, where we'd cooked Sunday breakfasts. Each memory was a fresh cut, but I refused to let them bleed. I was not there to mourn. I was there to dismantle. My first target was the Wi-Fi router. It sat innocently on the desk in the study, its blinking lights a testament to the digital web that once connected our lives. With a perverse satisfaction, I logged into the router's admin panel. My fingers, steady despite the tremor in my chest, typed out the new network name. Asterisk incest and insurance 2025 asterisk, no spaces, no frills. Just the brutal truth laid bare for anyone who knew our story to decode. A small, wicked smile touched my lips. It was a digital whisper, a secret taunt only they would understand, a promise of the public humiliation to come. Next, the thermostat. Preston was notoriously particular about the temperature, always preferring it a cozy 72 degrees. I marched to the wall, deliberately ignoring the framed photo of us smiling on our honeymoon. With a firm press of my thumb, I cranked the heating down to a glacial 50 degrees Fahrenheit. Then, for good measure, I adjusted the schedule to blast cold air for an hour every morning at 3 a.m. A minor inconvenience perhaps, but a constant, irritating reminder that I had been there, that I still held power over the small, mundane comforts of their life. It was a silent sabotage, a pebble in their shoe. But it felt like a cannonball to me. Then, the task of gathering my belongings. I moved through the house with a detachment that surprised me. I didn't linger over the clothes in the closet, once chosen with Preston in mind. I grabbed practical items. Warm sweaters, everyday jeans, a few favorite books that had no association with him. I picked up the worn copy of Times, Pride and Prejudice, Times that had been a gift from my grandmother, a sturdy leather-bound journal, and my old university hoodie. I left behind the expensive jewelry Preston had bought me, the designer dresses I'd worn to his company functions, even our wedding album. They were tainted, remnants of a false life, and I wanted no part of them. Each item left behind was a deliberate severance, a shedding of the skin of the woman I used to be. I was packing for a new life, not just moving house. As I walked out, my small duffel bag slung over my shoulder, the house felt colder, emptier. But the chill I felt wasn't from the thermostat. It was the liberating coldness of a slate wiped clean. I had retrieved what truly mattered, planted my seeds of defiance, and left behind a legacy of truth in the very heart of their lies. The game was escalating, and as I closed the door for the last time, hearing the satisfying click of the lock, I knew I wasn't just reacting to their treachery anymore. I was orchestrating my comeback. The planning had begun, and the first notes of a very loud, very public symphony of their undoing had just been played. The digital world, once a trivial backdrop to my life, now became a stage. Back at Cassie's, the cold satisfaction of my little acts of defiance at the house, the Wi-Fi password, the thermostat began to morph into a restless energy. Those were whispers. Now, it was time for a controlled shout. I thought of the cake, the beautiful, untouched chocolate masterpiece lying on Beatrice's floor, a monument to my shattered hopes. It was a symbol, potent and painfully ironic. And it was exactly what I needed. My fingers hovered over my phone screen, my breath catching. The plan was simple, devious, and perfectly engineered to strike at Preston's Achilles heel. His carefully constructed image. I scrolled through my photo gallery, found the picture I'd taken before the 9-hour drive, the cake perfect in its white box, the rich chocolate ganache gleaming. His favorite. I remembered piping the last swirl. A desperate prayer. Now, it would be a poisoned arrow. I opened Facebook, clicked Create Post, and uploaded the image. No caption, no explanation. Just the cake, sitting there, innocent and loaded with unspoken meaning. It was an enigma, a puzzle for anyone who knew our lives, especially Preston. He knew that cake, knew its significance. He knew I'd driven through a blizzard with it, but he wouldn't know times why times it was pictured, or times what times it now represented. The ambiguity was the weapon, designed to gnaw at his conscience, to unravel his composure. I imagined him seeing it, his mind racing, trying to piece together the fragments of what he'd done with this jarring visual. The thought sent a jolt of vindication through me. This wasn't just a divorce. It was a psychological war. And I had just fired the first public shot. The silence after I hit post was deafening, a prelude to the impending chaos. It didn't take long. Within minutes my phone vibrated. A text from Sarah, a mutual friend. "Eleanor, is everything okay? Saw your post, Preston's cake? Did you two celebrate?" Another from David. "Glad to see you guys worked things out." Their well-meaning confusion was precisely what I wanted. It created a public narrative that Preston couldn't control. A shadow of doubt cast over his carefully curated persona. But the real storm began when Preston himself reached out. His first text was casual, dismissive. "Hey, saw your post. What's that supposed to be? Some kind of joke?" I didn't reply. His second, 10 minutes later, was laced with irritation. "Eleanor, I'm asking you a question. Don't be childish." Still nothing from me. Then, the calls started. Missed call after missed call, his name flashing accusingly on my screen. I let them go to voicemail, picturing him, red-faced and agitated, pacing Beatrice's apartment, undoubtedly fuming about the confusing Wi-Fi password and the sudden chill in his perpetually warm home. His texts grew frantic, the veneer of calm cracking with each unanswered attempt. "Eleanor, pick up. This isn't funny. What is going on?" Then, a note of desperation began to creep in. "Look. I know you're upset. We can talk about this. Just tell me what this post means. People are asking. Asterisk. People are asking. Asterisk." That was the key. His reputation, the flawless image he projected, was being chipped away, not by accusations, but by my silence, by an innocent-looking picture. The satisfaction that spread through me was a deep, quiet warmth, a counterpoint to the glacial horror I had endured. He was squirming, he was panicked, and I held all the cards. He had no idea what I knew, no idea what I possessed. He was walking blind into a trap of his own making. I watched him unravel, a perverse delight flickering in my chest. This wasn't the swift, clean vengeance I'd once fantasized about in my pain. It was something far more potent. It was psychological torture. A slow, agonizing realization for him that he was losing control. His subsequent messages alternated between thinly veiled threats and pathetic pleas for an explanation. He even tried to gaslight me. "You're being irrational, Eleanor. You know how much I hate drama. Just tell me what you want." Asterisk, what I want? Asterisk, I scoffed quietly. I wanted justice. I wanted to see him broken, just as he had broken me. As the day wore on, I felt a shift within myself. The fear was still there, a lingering shadow, but it was now overshadowed by an almost clinical focus. Preston had been sufficiently agitated, sufficiently confused. His pride was wounded, his carefully constructed lies were starting to show cracks, and his paranoia was reaching a fever pitch. He would be desperate. And desperation made people reckless. This wasn't a game I could win from the shadows much longer. It was time for the direct confrontation, the moment I would unleash the truth. I looked at Cassie, who had been a silent, steadfast presence beside me, offering quiet support. "It's time," I said, my voice steady, imbued with a newfound resolve. "He'll come. And when he does, he won't be leaving the same man." The final pieces of my orchestration were falling into place. I just needed to set the stage for his grand, public downfall. The minutes that followed my declaration stretched, taut and heavy, around us. Cassie simply squeezed my hand, a silent acknowledgement of the battle to come. We waited, the living room a hushed arena, until the frantic pounding on the front door shattered the quiet. My heart gave a single hard thud against my ribs, but strangely, there was no fear, only a cold, exhilarating readiness. Cassie exchanged a glance with me, a subtle nod confirming our plan. She opened the door just enough to frame Preston's agitated face. He stood there, not the suave, composed man I had married, but a disheveled version, his hair mussed, his eyes wide and bloodshot, betraying the sleepless nights I knew my silence had caused. "Eleanor, thank God!" he exclaimed, attempting to push past Cassie, his voice a strained mix of relief and barely contained fury. "What the hell is going on? What's with the cryptic Facebook posts? And my Wi-Fi? My house is freezing, Eleanor. This isn't funny." Cassie blocked his path with a firm hand on his chest. "You're not coming in here like that, Preston. Eleanor will talk to you, but you need to calm down." He bristled, his gaze finally finding me, sitting calmly on Cassie's sofa. His eyes narrowed, a flicker of his old dismissiveness returning, quickly replaced by a feigned concern. Baby, what is all this? You've been gone for days. I was worried sick. You know how you get when you're overwhelmed. Let's just talk, privately, at home. We can sort this out." His voice was honeyed, dripping with the practiced manipulation I had endured for years. He took a step towards me, his hands reaching out, an automatic gesture designed to draw me back into his orbit, his control, but I didn't flinch. I just looked at him. Truly times looked times at him, seeing not the husband I once adored, but the monster he truly was. My voice, when it came, was steady, devoid of the tremor that used to betray my every insecurity around him. "There's nothing to sort out, Preston. Not anymore." His face hardened. "Don't be dramatic, Eleanor. What is this, some kind of stunt? You're clearly distraught. We're married, for crying out loud. Let's not make a scene." He tried to smile, but it was a grotesque distortion, a rictus of forced charm. "Beatrice is worried about you too, you know. We both are. This isn't like you." The mention of Beatrice, delivered with such practiced innocence, was the final spark. I reached into my pocket, pulling out the small digital recorder. Its sleek black form felt impossibly heavy in my palm, a tiny harbinger of doom. Preston's eyes flickered to it, confusion warring with a dawning apprehension. Cassie, standing protectively by the door, gave me a subtle nod. "Worried about me?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper, yet it resonated with an icy power that made him involuntarily take a step back. "You and Beatrice? That's rich, Preston. Truly." "Because I heard exactly how worried you both were." I pressed play. The small device filled the silent room with the chilling echo of their voices. "See? I told you she was obsessed with him." Beatrice purred, her voice dripping with venom. "Let her try. Won't matter soon. Did you get the documents from Margaret's office? The insurance payout is still valid, right? We need to make sure everything's in order before, you know." Preston's callous chuckle, then Beatrice's dangerously eager reply. "Of course. The life insurance policy is solid. And once she's out of the picture, all her family money flows straight to you, darling. No messy divorce, no division of assets. Pure, clean inheritance. Just us, Preston, finally. We'll be set for life." I always knew she was too stupid to see past her own delusions. The sound vibrated through the room, through my very bones, yet I remained perfectly still, watching Preston. As Beatrice's words about pure, clean inheritance echoed, his face drained of all color, his jaw sagged. His eyes, which had been darting wildly between the recorder and my face, went utterly blank. He stared, unblinking, at the device in my hand, as if it were a venomous snake about to strike. His chest hitched, a small choked gasp escaping his lips. The recording continued, each syllable a nail in his coffin. His body began to tremble, almost imperceptibly at first, then violently. His hands flew to his head, clutching his temples as if trying to physically block out the incriminating sounds. No, that's not. You misunderstood," he stammered, his voice a hoarse, desperate croak, but his eyes betrayed him, filled with a raw, undeniable terror. Sweat beaded on his forehead, glistening under the soft lamplight. When the recording finally clicked off, the silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. Preston's eyes met mine, and for the first time, I saw not contempt or manipulation, but pure, unadulterated fear. His perfect facade, the careful layers of charm and control, had crumbled to dust before my very eyes. His knees buckled, and he collapsed onto Cassie's spotless carpet, a broken heap of a man. His shoulders shook, and a low, guttural moan tore from his throat, a sound of utter despair. He pressed his face into his hands, his body racked with silent sobs. The mighty Preston Sterling, laid bare and utterly destroyed. A wave of profound relief, sharp and exhilarating, washed over me. It wasn't the sweet, vengeful fantasy I'd once harbored, but a deeper, more satisfying justice. He had been caught, he had nowhere to run. The heavy cloak of fear, of uncertainty, lifted from my shoulders, replaced by a lightness I hadn't felt in years. This wasn't just about escaping death. It was about reclaiming my life, my dignity, my very self. I stood up, my legs steady, my head held high. The power was mine again, and he knew it. Preston Sterling, once the picture of polished control, lay sprawled on Cassie's carpet, a broken caricature of the man he'd pretended to be. His sobs, though silent, racked his body, a desperate performance. But I saw through it. The veneer of heartbreak was thin, quickly replaced by a familiar flicker of his calculated desperation. When he finally lifted his head, his eyes red-rimmed and pleading. "Eleanor, please," he rasped, his voice raw. He tried to crawl towards me, a pathetic sight. "You don't understand. This isn't what it seems. Beatrice, she put me up to it. She manipulates me. You know that. She's always been jealous of us, of what we had." His gaze darted to Cassie, then back to me, searching for any sign of doubt, any crack in my resolve. "It was a joke, Elle. A terrible, terrible joke. We were just venting. You know how stressful my job is and the money problems we've been having?" Cassie stepped forward, her presence a solid wall between us. "Get out, Preston." Her voice was low, dangerous. He ignored her, fixing his gaze on me again. "Please, baby. Think about our life. 7 years, Elle. Don't throw it all away because of a misunderstanding. I love you. I always have. We can fix this. We can go to therapy. Get Beatrice out of our lives for good. Just, please, don't do this." His voice rose, tinged with a subtle threat. "You have no idea what you're messing with, Eleanor. My family, they'll destroy you." I looked at him. Truly looked at him. No trace of the boy I'd loved, only a terrified, cornered animal. His pleas were hollow, his threats impotent. The words he'd spoken on that recording, the cold calculation in his voice, had stripped away any last illusion. He wasn't begging for times me asterisk. He was begging for his life of comfort, his flawless reputation. "I heard you, Preston," I said, my voice steady, my gaze unwavering. "Every word. You didn't just want me out of your life. You wanted me dead, for money, for inheritance. There is no misunderstanding, there is no going back." His eyes widened, the last vestiges of feigned sorrow vanishing, replaced by a flash of impotent rage. "You'll regret this, Eleanor. You think you can just waltz in here and ruin my life? You'll be nothing. I'll make sure you lose everything." Cassie took another step, her hand hovering over the phone in her pocket. "That's enough. Get out now, or I call the police." Preston glared, but the fight had drained out of him. He knew he was beaten. He staggered to his feet, a pathetic sight, his clothes disheveled, his face blotchy with tears and sweat. He cast one last venomous glance at me, a silent promise of retribution, before Cassie ushered him firmly out the door, locking it securely behind him. The silence that descended then was profound, heavy with the weight of everything that had just transpired. I sank back onto the sofa, a bone-deep weariness washing over me, yet beneath it, a strange, exhilarating lightness. He was gone. The monster had been unmasked, his power over me shattered. Cassie knelt beside me, pulling me into a hug. "You did it, Elle. You were incredible." A fragile smile touched my lips. "It's not over, is it?" "No," she admitted, pulling back, her eyes serious. "But it's a huge first step. Margaret's going to be so proud." Within hours we were back at Margaret O'Connell's office. The lawyer listened to the recording, her expression grim, a flicker of outrage in her usually stoic eyes. "This is precisely what we needed, Eleanor. This changes everything from civil divorce to potential criminal charges. Attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder. The DA will be very interested in this." She moved with incredible speed. That same afternoon, the official divorce papers were filed, not just on grounds of irreconcilable differences, but citing extreme cruelty and marital misconduct, backed by the chilling audio evidence. Simultaneously, a temporary restraining order was secured, legally barring Preston and Beatrice from coming within a specified distance of me. Watching Margaret's assistant slide the thick stack of documents across the counter at the courthouse, each stamped with an official seal, felt like carving my freedom into stone. The relief that surged through me was a deep, physical sensation, like shedding a heavy cloak I hadn't realized I'd been wearing for years. It was bittersweet though. The love I'd cherished was dead, horribly so, and the life I'd envisioned for myself was irrevocably altered. There was a raw emptiness where Preston used to be, a scar that would undoubtedly take time to heal. But beneath the ache, a fierce, protective joy sparked. The legal battle was just beginning, a daunting mountain looming ahead. I knew it wouldn't be easy. Preston, with his family's wealth and connections, would undoubtedly fight dirty. There would be accusations, smears, attempts to discredit me. But standing there, the courthouse doors closing behind me, I felt a new kind of strength. My initial victory, the seismic shockwave I had sent through Preston's carefully constructed world, had fortified me. I was no longer the naive, heartbroken wife, desperate to salvage a lie. I was Eleanor, a survivor. Armed with truth and supported by unwavering allies, I had faced my greatest fear, confronted the monster, and lived to tell the tale. The fight ahead would be brutal, but I was ready. This wasn't just about winning a divorce. It was about reclaiming my entire life. The reality of the fight ahead arrived sooner than expected, heralded by a name I never wished to see on my phone screen again. Mrs. Sterling. My ex-mother-in-law. My hand instinctively recoiled. But then a surge of something cold and defiant straightened my fingers. I took a deep breath and answered. Her voice, usually a carefully modulated purr of southern gentility, was a furious hiss. "Eleanor. What in God's name do you think you're doing? Ruining my son's life? Destroying our family name? Have you lost your mind?" I gripped the phone tighter. The old fear of her disapproval, of her formidable presence, threatening to surface. For years, she had subtly, expertly, made me feel inadequate, a mere accessory to Preston's brilliant life. She'd always had a way of cutting me down with a smile, praising Preston's achievements while subtly implying my own were trivial. Now, the mask was entirely off. "Mrs. Sterling," I began, my voice surprisingly steady, "I think you know exactly what I'm doing." A sharp, disbelieving laugh crackled through the line. "Oh really? You think accusing Preston and Beatrice of times that asterisk will get you what you want? A bigger payout? You're delusional, girl. Everyone knows you've always been a little fragile, prone to hysterics. Preston has been nothing but good to you. This is a cruel, calculating attack, and it will not stand. Her words twisted in my gut. Asterisk fragile. Hysterics. Asterisk. The old wounds, inflicted by both Preston and his mother, bled afresh. But this time, they didn't cripple me. They hardened me. Fragile? Mrs. Sterling, I drove 9 hours through a blizzard to surprise your son, only to find him in bed with his sister, planning my murder. How's that for fragile? A moment of stunned silence from her end. Then, a chillingly calm, yet venomous tone. You heard wrong. You imagined things. Preston would never. Beatrice would never. They're under immense stress, Eleanor. And you've pushed them to their limits. This recording you claim to have? It's fabricated. A pathetic attempt to salvage your pride after Preston finally decided to move on from a marriage that was clearly not working. The audacity took my breath away. She wasn't just denying it. She was twisting it. Accusing me times of being the aggressor. The unstable one. It confirmed what I had instinctively known but refused to acknowledge for years. This family wasn't just dysfunctional. It was rotten to its core. Their loyalty wasn't to truth or morality, but to their own warped image and their privileged existence. They were all complicit, blind to their own depravity, or perhaps, simply uncaring. I remembered the way Mrs. Sterling would always gloss over Beatrice's erratic behavior, or how she would quietly enable Preston's more selfish tendencies, painting them as ambition. This call merely confirmed the true depth of that enabling, that shared delusion. Your son was planning to have me murdered for my inheritance, Mrs. Sterling, I repeated, letting each word hang in the air like an accusation. He and Beatrice, for pure, clean inheritance. You can deny it all you want, but the authorities won't. And neither will the court. Her voice rose, shrill with genuine fury now. The authorities? You wouldn't dare. Do you have any idea who we are, Eleanor? The Sterlings have influence, connections. You think a small-town lawyer and a hysterical woman can bring us down? You will be crushed. Financially, socially, we will make sure you lose everything. Your name will be mud. You will regret the day you ever crossed my son. My heart hammered. A primal fear flaring up at her blatant threats. This was the Sterling machine, the power I had been up against, a force I once felt entirely helpless against. But looking out at the morning sun streaming into Cassie's living room, feeling the solid floor beneath my feet, I realized something profound. Her threats no longer held the same power. They were the desperate roars of a wounded beast, not the terrifying pronouncements of an unstoppable empire. I had already faced the worst they could do. The betrayal. The plot to end my life. What more could she take that truly mattered? No, Mrs. Sterling, I said, my voice clear and firm, a steel rod running through my spine. I won't regret it, because unlike your son and your daughter, I have nothing to hide. I have the truth, and it will set me free. And as for your threats, you can tell your son to save them for the police. This conversation is over. Without waiting for her reply, I hung up. The silence that followed was profound. But this time, it wasn't heavy or suffocating. It was liberating. The phone felt light in my hand, as if shedding the weight of years of unspoken expectations and subtle manipulations. The call had been chilling. Yes, a confirmation of the Sterling family's toxic core, their willingness to protect their own at any cost. But it also severed the last, lingering thread that connected me to them. There was no going back, no possibility of reconciliation, no doubt about the path I was on. I was truly, irrevocably alone in this fight. But that very isolation, paradoxically, filled me with an exhilarating sense of freedom. Their influence, their judgment, their twisted version of loyalty, none of it could touch me anymore. I was free. I savored the quiet. The feeling of the Sterling weight finally lifted from my shoulders. When my phone vibrated again, this time the caller ID didn't display a name that filled me with dread, but one that sparked a different kind of shock. Mark. Preston, you friend. Mark. Preston's college roommate. A quiet, unassuming man I hadn't seen in years. My finger hesitated, hovering over the screen. Was this another one of Preston's convoluted attempts to reach me, using a mutual acquaintance as a pawn? After Mrs. Sterling's call, I was wary of anyone from their orbit, but the name didn't belong to the inner circle of Sterling sycophants. Curiosity, a dangerous yet irresistible impulse, won out. I answered. Eleanor? Is this really you? His voice was hesitant, laced with an unfamiliar urgency. It's Mark. Mark Evans. From college. And a bit after. Mark, I replied, my voice cool, guarded. To what do I owe this call? A deep sigh came through the line. Look, Eleanor, I heard. About everything. Or, at least, what's being whispered. The divorce. The rumors. I know Preston's been trying to paint you as crazy, manipulative, but I don't believe it. I couldn't just sit by anymore. My grip on the phone tightened. What do you mean, Mark? What exactly have you heard? Enough, he said, his voice tinged with a raw guilt. I saw your Facebook post. The one with the cake. And the new Wi-Fi name. It clicked. Eleanor, it all clicked. And I feel like a total coward for not saying anything sooner. My heart began to pound. A different kind of rhythm now. One mixed with apprehension and a faint, hopeful tremor. Saying what, Mark? He paused, as if gathering his courage. Preston and Beatrice. They've always been off. Not just close. You know? Way too close. Even back in college, I remember them at parties, how she'd cling to him, the way he'd let her touch him in ways no brother should allow. It always gave me the creeps. But Preston was my friend. And I just told myself it was sibling weirdness. You know? Dismissed it. I saw them once, after Preston graduated at his parents' summer house. I walked in on them in the pool house. It was clear as day. I ran out of there, didn't say a word to anyone. Preston cornered me later. Threatened my scholarship if I breathed a word. He was terrifying. I was young, stupid, intimidated. I've lived with that guilt ever since. Telling myself it wasn't my business. That it couldn't be what I thought it was. I just rationalized it away. Pushed it down. His words cascaded over me. Each one a validation. A painful confirmation of my own suppressed suspicions. Asterisk, sibling weirdness. Asterisk, that was exactly how I had tried to frame it. How Preston had forced me to frame it. But Mark had seen the truth long before me, and he had been silenced when I heard the rumors about the divorce, and then the whispers about you accusing them of plotting against you, he continued, his voice gaining strength. I knew I couldn't stay silent anymore, especially with that Wi-Fi name. Asterisk. Incest and Insurance 2025. Asterisk, it's them, isn't it? It's all true. A profound wave of relief washed over me. So potent it almost buckled my knees. It wasn't just my word against theirs. It wasn't just Cassie and Margaret, my loyal allies, who believed me. Here was an independent witness. Someone from Preston's times past. Someone who had seen the insidious rot at its genesis. He had no personal stake, no agenda, other than the burden of his own conscience finally breaking free. Yes, Mark, I said, my voice thick with emotion. It's all true. Then I'll testify, he declared, his resolve firm. I'll tell them everything I saw, everything I heard, the pool house, the threats, Preston's behavior. I know it's not much. But if it helps you, Eleanor, I have to do it. I can't live with the guilt of enabling him, of letting him get away with it again, especially after what he and Beatrice tried to do to you. I should have spoken up years ago, when it was just personal. Now it's life and death. I won't make that mistake twice. The unexpected support brought a surge of hope so intense it felt like sunlight bursting through a storm cloud. Mark's testimony wouldn't just be legal evidence, it would be a powerful, objective narrative, ripping through Preston's carefully constructed public image. It would expose the twisted core of his relationship with Beatrice, not just to the courts, but to their wider social circle. To anyone who had ever admired the seemingly successful Preston Sterling, it added a layer of public humiliation, a deep, inescapable shame that no amount of money or influence could erase. Preston's carefully guarded secrets, those he had threatened Mark to protect, were finally coming to light, brought forth by the very people he thought he could control. I wasn't alone anymore, and the truth, with Mark's help, would finally be undeniable. The unexpected voice on the phone, a ghost from Preston's past, didn't just offer evidence. It validated a profound truth that had been slowly simmering within me. Mark's confession, his own burden of guilt finally shed, was the final shard of glass that cemented the image of the woman I had become. The Eleanor who had desperately driven 9 hours through a blizzard, clinging to a dying hope, was gone. In her place stood someone forged in fire. A woman stripped of her illusions, yet paradoxically, stronger than she had ever been. My transformation wasn't a sudden burst of phoenix-like rebirth, but a brutal, inch-by-inch journey through the wreckage of my life. It began with the sickening realization in Beatrice's apartment. A moment that tore me apart, but also forced me to see with horrifying clarity. Then came the numbing shock, the breakdown in Cassie's arms, the unraveling of everything I thought was real. But through that pain, a new Eleanor began to emerge. The fragile wife, accustomed to Preston's subtle gaslighting and my own denial, had been annihilated. In her stead, a strategist, a fighter, was born. Margaret O'Connell's pragmatic guidance, Cassie's unwavering belief, and even my own small acts of defiance, the Wi-Fi password, the thermostat were not just steps in a legal battle, they were milestones in my personal reclamation. Each action, no matter how small, chipped away at the victim I once was, building up the survivor. As I prepared for the arduous legal battle ahead, my mindset was no longer one of fear or even pure vengeance. It was a cold, calculated determination. I had faced the darkest corners of human depravity, staring down the monster that was my husband and his sister. Their threats, once capable of crippling me, now merely underscored their desperation. I knew Preston and his family would fight dirty, using their wealth and influence to smear my name, to discredit my truth. But they didn't know the Eleanor who now stood ready. They didn't know the woman who had walked back into her own death trap to secure evidence, who had stared down her abuser and unveiled his monstrous lies. My strength wasn't just in the evidence I held, but in the unwavering clarity of my purpose. This wasn't just about winning a divorce, or even bringing them to justice. It was about defining who Eleanor truly was, independent of their twisted narrative. The journey of self-discovery had been excruciating, a painful excavation of my own vulnerabilities and hidden strengths. I had learned to trust my instincts again, to recognize the insidious patterns of manipulation, to value my own worth beyond the confines of a fraudulent marriage. The grief was still there, a deep ache for the future I had imagined and the years I had unknowingly wasted. But alongside it, a profound sense of liberation bloomed. This ordeal, though horrifying, had stripped away the superficial, leaving behind the essence of who I was meant to be. I understood now that healing wasn't about forgetting the past, but about integrating it, letting the scars become proof of survival, not just pain. Looking towards the future, the canvas of my life, once meticulously painted by Preston, stretched out before me, blank and exhilarating. There would be new beginnings, new paths to explore. Perhaps I would pick up painting again, a passion I'd abandoned years ago. Maybe I'd volunteer, lending my voice to others who had been silenced. The possibilities, once confined by a suffocating marriage, were now limitless. I would rebuild my life, brick by brick. But this time, the foundation would be built on truth, integrity, and my own unwavering strength. I would embrace the freedom I had fought so hard to reclaim, finding purpose not in the reflection of another, but in the unwavering light of my own soul. My story, I knew, was far from over. The courtroom battles, the public scrutiny, the long road to true emotional peace, these were all ahead. But I was no longer afraid. My final message, whispered to the fierce, brave woman I saw in the mirror, was one of unwavering hope and profound strength. To anyone who found themselves lost in the shadows of betrayal, silenced by fear, or broken by deceit, I would say this: fight. Fight for your truth. Fight for your voice. Fight for the life that is rightfully yours. Reclaim your power, one step, one breath, one defiant act at a time, because the truth, no matter how terrifying, will ultimately set you free. And once you are free, the world, in all its beautiful, messy, unpredictable glory, truly becomes yours to claim.